Good evening, guys. By the way, we're in a voice channel, so mute your mics if they're not already muted. And we're going to be doing the futures trading. We'll do my futures trading review today, and we'll see how we're feeling afterwards. We'll do a study session after, but as far as the recording, we will just record the futures trade review. So how we did from today's session. I was in today's session for a very long time. I'm setting out like a 2 hour block to trade my futures, second through third hour. And I end up staying in there a bit longer than I thought I would. So we end up doing a decent amount, but I stopped trading at the end and unfortunately started getting really good at the end. But this is pretty much where we started. And as you can see, my confidence is pretty low because lately the second hour of trading has been god awful. And it looks very similar to that. You can see we're getting general compression. We're no longer getting bullish liquidity sweeps. However, I do have some major bias. I am bearish for us to get to this line. Right, we missed it right here at 60.21. I'm bearish for us to get there. I'm also bearish for us to eventually get to this major low as well, right around 178. So give me 1 second. I will just realize I'm not sharing my screen. Thank you for reminding me. There you guys go. Now you in Discord can see my screen. All right. So those are the major lows I'm looking at. Options was a great morning. Took 3 green trades. Beautiful. Sold my calls at this blue line up here. It was great. But it's looking fairly 50-50 now as far as NQ goes. NQ's a lot stronger than ES. ES looks pretty good for a new low of day. It really does. But anyways, so if we kind of continue on, boom, 1 minute into my session, ES hits my 60.21 level, making a perfect double bottom, and it ends up bouncing. Now, I am thinking about NASDAQ longs at this point because, it's invalidated a majority of the drop. So I am kind of triggered in for new high of day. But the problem is now I have this brand new conflicting bias and conflicting analysis. That double bottom needs a break, in my opinion. But it still looks okay for a bounce. ES could be putting in a falling wedge. So I decided to wait and kind of see what ends up happening. So still waiting. It hasn't bounced high enough on ES for me to get a good risk to reward on a short trade. As you can see now, it's starting to bounce and NQ's flipping weak. And also we're starting to chop up in supply, which is generally bearish, right? Chopping up is bearish, chopping down is bullish. But the longer you chop, slowly it'll lose its sentiment. But for now, it looks like fairly bullish chop on the NASDAQ. And I end up taking my first trade in a few minutes. Here we are popping up. Still maybe leaning bullish for the NASDAQ to get to new high of day. However, it's now weaker than ES. As you can see, it's not bouncing nearly as much. And I won't go long on ES because ES has been weaker. It's towards the bottom of the range of today. And it's still got that perfect double bottom. So I hold off. And boom. I am confirmed into shorts here. We have perfect double bottom, gorgeous price target. We invalidate a majority of the bounce. So this is the first trade I take live. Pretty decent trade. And I'm not going far on the PT at all. Not going far at all because all I'm getting is chop, right? So if I'm not getting much, I'm not going to ask for much. But if the market's ranging really hard and sweeping liquidity nicely, then I'll extend my PTs off. But for now, I'm just doing the bare minimum. And it did end up hitting. So that was the first trade, and it ended up being a win, which was beautiful. And I still have bearish sentiment. I'm still leaning bearish for NQ to get to this blue line. Now, I thought it was going to get here. It did make lower lows, but it missed my main pivot. I do have a couple more pivots. I got this one right here, which is nearly a perfect double bottom. I have this one here. Then I also have one at the bottom of demand. And on ES, I got this one here. That one's pretty much going to hit this one. And on the NASDAQ 15-minute chart, you could see, this is right around the time I said, the 15-minute chart on the NASDAQ is not bullish, it's bearish. We got a head and shoulders, we have higher highs, so bearish liquidity sweeps in supply, and we have higher lows, lack of bullish liquidity sweeps to counteract that. Overall, it's looking rather bearish. So that's where my sentiment's at. And I do chart, some decent little pivots. I chart this one here and just going back to what I had charted today. Okay, so now I can't really enter short because ES is at low a day, but ES is technically weaker than the Nasdaq, and I'm starting to lean bearish for all of this demand to break and us to get to 60.12 on ES. But we bounce. I'm like, okay, maybe I do end up taking NQ longs because it's true. If we do bounce up and this drop invalidates, I'm triggered into a long trade into a high of day, which will not look too bad because it now looks like it's stronger than ES, and ES has swept liquidity, made lower lows. That'll support that long trade. However, it didn't. And looking back on it, it was an okay trade. Looking back, so I entered my second trade here. The close of this NQ candle, it was kind of a head and shoulders, really fractal. The big thing was I was leaning super bearish right here. I held off. I was getting close to entering long because, it's compressing, so I'm flipping back and forth a lot. And then we just invalidated this bounce with a very large red candle. My hypothesis was that it's at least going to get to this low. And by the time it clears that low, I'd be triggered in short for this level anyways. So really, it's a riskier trade because I took it like in the middle of the range and the risk to reward is very high, over 2.0, which hurts the odds of it working out. But I took this trade. Looking back on it, it's good. It's decent. I wouldn't say it's up to the same standard as my other trades. It's definitely a high risk, high reward trade. But I filled this trade like in the last 2 seconds of the candle. I don't even know if one person took this trade. Maybe a couple did. So I filled this trade right at the end of the candle. I said I did. And then immediately into the next candle, I said, don't fill it. It looks terrible. Because this candle happened. Next candle immediately started off green. I'm like, don't follow this trade. And so I was in this trade for like 15 seconds. I gave it a shot. It's whatever. But NQ's back to being stronger. I said, for that short hypothesis, if this bounce invalidates again, then you can take it. But very few people took that trade simply because I was only in there for about 15 seconds. But we end up coming up. I was thinking, okay, well, we might break to the upside here. But overall, we just have a pennant. And, not sure which way this is going to want to break. ES, not helping either with sentiment. And then we end up dropping. And I took a bit of an earlier entry. But now this is looking, within this pennant, this is looking like it's still sketchy, but it's looking like a more proper head and shoulders. This is a more proper shoulder right here. It's not the best, but it works. And I ended up taking my third trade here. Now, the thing is, my PT was all the way down to here. And, my stop loss was roughly, so another really big risk to reward trade. A lot of people kind of filled later, but was a really good trade. NQ ended up flipping weak, which I also hypothesized. I mean, NQ's not going to stay strong forever. ES is down there in heavier demand, swept a lot more. It's hard for me to choose ES to go short on when NQ has PTs very close by and it hasn't swept by side liquidity like ES did. And I was correct. NQ did end up flipping weak, as you can see by the size of this red candle in comparison to the size of this ES red candle. And by this point, I said, okay, we bounced. We barely missed PT. Lord have mercy on me. I hate when this happens. But we invalidated the bounce, and this is when I said, it was roughly right here, I said, you know what? ES is really getting down towards this. I am bearish for us to get to this low. Like, as far as my strategy and my analysis is confirmed, I'm technically confirmed into a short trade to this low. Does that mean I get in? Probably not. I mean, it could head and shoulders and then go down, right? But I did say, it's starting to look more likely, that last candle that ES got was a bull hammer, got a big volume spike, all that stuff. So it is a reversal signal, but the way this candle's already invalidating this bounce's progress, it's starting to look like ES is pretty likely to get to this low. And with NQ being weaker than ES, it's pretty dang likely to get to this next pivot. So I did say, if you want to extend your PT out, you can. I was in at a pretty good average, so I just didn't. I already had a crazy risk to reward, and it was a tough decision. I knew it was fairly likely to get there, but in the off chance that it missed that second PT and hit the first one, and I didn't close, that would really, really, really hurt my psychology, and that just posed a bit too big of a risk. So that was a perfect double bottom, by the way. I did not fill my PT right here. I was at 78 flat on NQ. So that was very concerning. And we bounced, but we invalidated this bounce. And that's freaking bearish because ES also has a bear pennant going on. So looking back on it, yeah, it was a really good idea to extend my PT. Maybe I should have, but it was already a fairly big trade. It doesn't really matter. Anyways, it did end up not only getting to my PT, it got to the second one. So very green on the day. Started with one win. Took a loss that was much smaller than that win, and then we just had a huge win right there. So very green on the day. Green by like 2 average green trades, I'd say. So now we're here, and let me just catch up on my notes. Yeah, I'm bearish for ES to get to this low, the 612. I don't really have anything else. I mean, we're trending down. NQ got to this pivot. My next pivot on NQ is pretty far away. So just kind of waiting. If ES bounces, then I could enter short. And sure enough, ES bounced. I'm like, okay, I can't play ES to this low unless I get a bounce and we invalidate that bounce. The same trigger that got me into this short trade, right? It's just likely to happen. And NQ flipped a lot stronger than ES, so ES looked pretty decent to enter shorts. So I did end up filling my short trade on this candle right here at the close of this candle for another fairly small trade. It actually is a normal size trade. And yeah, so I filled this trade here. Was decent, invalidated most of the move. Here was the biggest concern about this trade. NQ inverse head and shoulders, and you can also kind of see it on ES as well. So that was the caveat to this trade. But I made a judgment call, and I thought the pivot was a little bit more likely to play out than the inverse head and shoulders. Also, we had a bearish liquidity sweep. When you have a positively sloping neckline on an inverse head and shoulders, or negatively sloping trend line or neckline on a head and shoulders, it's less likely to break out. And if it does break out, it's probably going to sweep. So I made the judgment call there. Started off green. Started off pretty green. And it missed my PT. So that was unfortunate. But, well, not only did it miss my PT, but ES made a lower low and bounce, which is bullish for starting to chop down. However, NQ did not make a lower low. It made a higher low and bounce, so it did not sweep buy-side liquidity, which aids in my probability of this continuing to go down, but not much. It's still kind of 50-50 now after this swept. So ES swept lower lows, bounce, that's bullish. NQ missed the lower lows, that's bearish. So they evened each other out. And ES ended up remaining weak, which was beautiful. And there we go. Now, I did call out that, technically we can continue down a ways. It's hard for me to be greedy, but by this point, super green day. Definitely a change of pace in comparison to the previous second hours of trading. Hopefully that curse is broken. Good Lord. The last 2 weeks have been terrible to trade the second hour, including yesterday. By the way, I know I usually do the, for you YouTube people, I usually do the futures trade reviews Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But yesterday was a crap day, and I just wasn't really feeling like doing it, to be honest. But today was a little bit better. Wasn't a huge red day or anything. I just went sideways for the first hour and a half of my stream. So, but anyways, now I am up 3 green trades, and I have 1 red trade. The 3 green are significantly less than the, or significantly more than the red. My smallest green trade was about 80% larger than the red trade. No, sorry. Like 50% larger than the red trade. So very green day. Was looking pretty good. So NQ ended up bouncing. Okay, that's potential bullish liquidity sweep. Notice the volume spikes that are happening. Okay, we make it indication of reversal here. We start invalidating this bounce. Not really looking too great. This did end up putting in bearish consolidation. I did call out a short trade or a short hypothesis. I didn't take it though. It was too close to low day, and I could get in. I decided not to. And it's a good thing that I did because NQ started chopping down quite a bit. But it did end up continuing anyway, so actually maybe I should have. But regardless, so NQ now was starting to look bearish for the next pivot. I'm like, okay, it is starting to look like it's going to get there. It's invalidated most of the move. For the same reason that I was bearish for ES to get to this liquidity, this blue line, I'm now bearish for NQ to get to that blue line. It's just hard for me to pull the trigger because I've already milked the cow so much on this drop. I'm looking for a bounce. I'm looking for something that anyways, there's the bounce. That is beautiful. And I did call out a long trade. Now, I scalped the long trade. I personally scalped it from here up to here. Wasn't a major trade. I could have gone further, but that's a reversal signal if I've ever seen one. It looked like it didn't even have a chance of turning around until the nearest liquidity, which was here. So I personally took this trade. I called it out, but by the time, like I said, I filled, this candle happened. I'm like, well, no one caught that unless you caught it on your own. Did end up hitting my PT. I'm like, okay, cool. So now I'm at 5 green trades, 1 red trade. And let me look at my journal for the next trade. There it is. And then I call out this trade here. This was a pretty good looking trade. I mean, I have to get in. I didn't really want to be honest, because NQ just bounced so freaking hard and it's already invalidating it. I have a hard time believing it's going to continue down. But I'm confirmed in. Looking back on it, ES was definitely weaker. I should have entered ES, but you know, it's whatever. I just took this to the low of day. Where did I actually take this to? Yeah, just below low of day. So that's where I took it to. And it did end up getting there. It missed here. Looked like it was going to stop out. And right here, I said, okay, we just bounced hard, barely missed PT. I thought it was going to stop out. It did not. I got very lucky. So now if this bounce invalidates, like I said before, we have higher lows. It's probably going to continue out of this pivot. If you want to extend it out, you can. I chose not to. It already bounced super hard twice, here and here from this level. I didn't want to hold much past it. And I did take profits there. So that's yet another green trade. So I'm at like 5 green trades, 1 red trade. That was beautiful. And this one didn't really count because I didn't really call this one out. But I didn't mark it on my chart or anything. So we start bouncing. ES is weaker than NQ still. You can't really tell what it wants to do. And I call out this short trade here. This was a pretty good trade. This was a decent setup. This one was pretty similar to the previous one. You know, I didn't take it. It was technically confirmed in if you wanted to take it. It's just, you know, we're chopping down. We have this trend line here now. Actually, it's not a good trend line. I take that back. Was it this one? Yeah, it was this one. You know, we have a very steep falling wedge, which isn't super bullish because this trend line's nearly vertical, which means it's going to break just by going sideways, so it's not really a big deal. But I did throw out this hypothesis. It got close to PT, but it missed it. Barely. And ended up going up. I'm like, okay, well, what pattern do we see possibly forming here? Inverse head and shoulders. And I also had bullish sentiment because we now have a perfect trend line on NQ. And this is actually a descending broadening wedge, which is a bullish reversal pattern. And the width of said wedge, or broadening wedge, and that's a conservative width. I mean, this wedge is a potential reversal all the way to high day. So I take that into account, and NQ looks pretty decent. You know, I don't mind NQ longs. I mean, we swept lower lows. We have a potential inverse head and shoulders. It looks stronger than ES. It doesn't look like it bounced as high as ES did, but I like this red candle more. It got a nice buying wick. I did say, okay, if this pullback invalidates, I'll hop into longs for this high right here. And I'll mark it with a blue line. Just a very conservative high. Nothing crazy. Pretty much a 1-to-1 risk to reward. That's what I'm looking for. And then the next candle did end up getting that green. So I actually filled this trade roughly here. Smaller trade, just looking for that high. And it was a really good trade. I mean, it was green most of the time. NQ was a lot stronger. ES had this inverse head and shoulders. Very high probability trade. But as you can see here, it barely missed my PT just by a little bit. I'm like, damn it. Because NQ, it didn't really put in the right shoulder yet. ES is trying to, but NQ did not put in the right shoulder yet. So it looks like NQ could pull back to put in the shoulder. But if it pulls back with my stop loss so tight, I'm probably just going to stop out and have to re-enter long. That's what I'm thinking. But at the same time, ES is putting in a bear pennant, and that's obviously rather bearish. You don't really see it yet. ES is potentially putting in a bear pennant. By the way, I keep getting blue balled with these bounces. This entire trade. Look, this candle flipped green. I'm like, oh my gosh, it has a chance. It did not have a chance. So I hit my stop loss at the start of the next candle. Small loss, whatever. I was really annoyed that that trade didn't hit PT. It was a great trade. I mean, it was green for a solid, what is that? 10:29 to... It was green for a solid 10 minutes before it stopped out. Like, it was a really good trade. I'm really upset that that one didn't hit. But anyways, this bearish consolidation looks like it's breaking to the downside on ES. And if the first leg is going to correlate to the second leg correlates to the first leg, I mean, we got room to drop. That puts us at this PT, right? Market moves in 2 legs. First leg consolidation, second leg. If the consolidation phase is proportional to the first leg, the second leg's likely to be proportional as well. Doesn't mean I'm going to put my PT all the way down here. Just means this is where it can go. It has solid potential to go there. And if we count out how big was this first leg, 953, and do you count this the end? I don't know. 953 to 1021, just under 30 minutes. Consolidation wasn't as long. You know, it's starting to break out here, so only about 20 minutes. Consolidation's a little shorter, which isn't bad. It's when the consolidation's longer, that's when it starts being weird. That's when it starts being less trusting. So anyways, most of the drop invalidates, and I fill short. So let me see where I filled that at. Fill it right here. And I filled at 40 at the close of this candle. Again, I had to go 1-to-1 on it. PT was fairly close. I usually don't take trades this small, but it is what it is. I think I might have had my PT further away. No, my PT was right there. So yeah, 1-to-1 on this trade. That hit. Maybe I went short on PT, but again, we've been chopping down this whole time. It's hard for me to just kind of think, oh yeah, it's just going to keep dumping. So there's another green trade. Made back that previous loss. That's cool. And I started to be bearish for this next major pivot on ES. And this pivot's kind of a big deal. It's not as big of a deal. You know, it's this one right here. It's okay. This is the big one, 59.90. That was the big one. And this is where the market just started dumping. I called out a short trade right here. Even though NQ's on a pivot, technically what I look for is a bounce, invalidate the bounce, nearest liquidity, boom. And it bounced and invalidated that bounce within the same candle. The volume spike was too high for me, and again, shorting at low day it's just kind of difficult, especially when you've been short this entire time. So I did end up calling it out. It did break to the downside. And I personally filled shorts here on NQ. Again, ES was, looking back on it, I should have just entered ES. The thing that kind of spooked me off, though, was it put in this doji. So ES was weaker, was dropping more, but it put in this green doji with the volume spike, indicating reversal. I didn't like it as much. So I entered this trade. This was pretty much the last major trade I took. There it is. Looking for this next pivot. It's rare that I enter continuation trades on pivots. It's actually against a rule of mine. But ES isn't on a pivot. And I'm bearish on ES, so I don't think it has terrible odds. Started looking real good, and then boom, that was beautiful. Unfortunately, it filled me right here. Did end up going further, and I'm like, wow. This looks like it's going to get to my next PT, which is the big one. I mean, that is, what is that, Friday's low? I think it's Friday's low. It's One major pivot from Friday pre-market, it looks like. So that's a big deal. That's a big pivot. And NQ, I don't really have anything else. That's it. That's all she wrote on NQ. So I was looking for ways to enter short here, and I just didn't get any. So I just kind of sat around, watched the market. That was pretty much my day. Lots of green trades, few red trades, but it was a really green day, so I was really happy with it. And I did call out the reversal signal that got put in here. Huge volume spike on NQ, buying wick. ES got to this pivot, we're chopping down. That looks good for a potential reversal. It bounced, thought it was going to get new low of day, and validated that bounce. And this is pretty much where I headed out. I headed out right here because I stuck around to see, okay, is this a bear flag? Or are we going to keep going down? And once we bounced up like this, I'm like, okay, well, if we do go down, it's not going to happen for a while. That's bullish as hell. And I don't really feel like going long because I've just been bearish all day. I don't want to flip and go long. And for this thing to, if I flip and go long here and it drops back down, I'm going to have to enter shorts. I'm going to be stuck trading for a lot longer and risking psych decay. So, but keep in mind, by the time I did kind of check out charts a little bit, and I did leave this pivot up on my chart. It's a solid pivot, especially because this green trade barely missed already. So it's a very tested area. This is a very solid price target. And I would be bullish for it to get there if it invalidates more than 50% of the drop. And where's that 50% at? That's 50% invalidated. So that would have been a great long. Too bad I wasn't watching the market for it. And this would have been a very nice long as well. Invalidated this dip. Nice little cup and handle. Bullish consolidation here on ES. And it looks like it just ran. But that was my day. It was a very good day. Very happy with it. I don't think I missed anything. That was pretty much all the TA just summed up. So hopefully you guys' ears are okay for my ranting. But with that being said, type in chat. Do you guys have any questions regarding anything I just talked about? Nope, everyone's good. All right, sweet. So that was my trade review for today. Also, that live stream was recorded. I think it's on my YouTube. So if you guys want to watch that live stream of me trading, you can do that. And yeah, we'll do it again tomorrow. Hopefully tomorrow is just as good of a day. Probably it won't be. Today was a really good day, but we'll give it our best shot. And you guys vote in chat right now if you guys want to. I'm going to end the recording here. You guys vote in chat right now if you guys want to do a study session. If not, we can hold off on the study session for Thursday.